Demonstration Nugget, Cloud SQL Instances Advanced. Hello everybody, this is Ben Finkel, and in this nugget we're going to take a look at some of the advanced things that you can do when managing your Cloud SQL instances. That includes updating configuration settings on existing instances, both through the web UI and the command line interface, as well as taking a look at the RESTful API and the client library API that you can use to programmatically work with your instances. Once you've created your Cloud SQL instance, they are not fixed in stone, although it may appear that way. You wouldn't be remiss for thinking that. If we click an instance here in the web UI and scroll down, we can see all the different options that we've set up for this Cloud SQL instance, but notice that it's just a listing of them. We can't change them in any way. Well, in the web UI, you can change all of this stuff, and that's found here under the Edit command, or under the Edit button. Now, there are a couple of things that are immutable once you've created an instance. You cannot change the instance ID. The instance name is fixed once you've created it. You also can't change the region of the instance. If you want to move a database into a new region, you got to create an export, spin up a new database, and then import your export into that new database in the new region. The database version is equally fixed, in this case MySQL 5.5, although Google does have some documentation on upgrading from 5.5 to 5.6. However, outside of those things, everything can be changed, including the tier. If you decide that you need a bigger, more powerful tier of database, your database has grown, your usage has grown, go ahead and upgrade the tier of this database. Your billing plan, your preferred location, your backups, your activation policy, everything that you can set on the database when you create it can be changed right here from the web user interface under the Edit command when you're looking at the details of a given instance. That's all you need to do. Now, you can also update these things from the command line interface. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up my terminal, and if we stop and think about it for a second, it's not exactly clear what action we will want to do this with. One of the four actions, list, create, describe, and delete, don't really apply in this scenario. But this is where the -- help command is going to come in very handy. I'm going to call gcloud SQL instances -- help. What this is going to tell me is the different things that I can do with an instance. Specifically, I'm interested in command here. Notice that it's underlined inside of the documentation. This is the quick synopsis. Instances, the first thing I pass in is that command. Well, what commands are available to me? As I scroll down on my verbose help here, I can see I've got command. Command is one of the following. And there's a lot more than just the four actions for SQL instances. That's good, because I need something else. I can create clone, create an instance, delete an instance, describe an instance. There's also export and import, if I need to export and import. There's list, which I've seen before. And here's what I'm looking for. Patch updates the settings of a Google Cloud SQL instance. I want to get more help on that command, so I'm going to drop to my command line, and I'm going to call gcloud SQL instances patch -- help. Take a look at see what the patch command does. Aha! Now I see all of the different options that I have. gcloud SQL instances patch instance. I got to pass in an instance name, and then any of these options that I want to change. This will update the settings of my Google Cloud instance. So, for instance, let's say that I want to assign an IP to my -- instance. Well, I can just use the, it looks like the -- assign IP switch. Oops. Right there, -- assign IP. So I'm going to drop back to my command line, come up here, and say gcloud SQL instances my instance -- assign IP. Hit enter, then I'm going to wait for it. Oops, it didn't like my instance. Oh, I forgot my patch command. Instances patch my instance assign IP. Syntax is important, right? So here I can see it ran, and it patched my Cloud SQL instance, and it's done. If I come back here to my web UI, I should be able to see that now I've got an IP address assigned to my -- instance. There it is. So you can very easily update and patch your instances from both the web UI as well as the console. And in understanding what options are available to you, -- help is going to be really important. Now, there are a couple of more cool ways that you can interact with the instances inside of your Google Cloud SQL product. And those are the RESTful API service that you use an HTTP command to run through, and the client API libraries that you can use inside of your favorite programming language. Each of those requires really a whole nugget on their own to get any sort of depth into. But I just want to take a few minutes here to show each of them in action so you can get a feel for how they work. To start with, I'm going to drop down to my terminal window here, and I'm going to paste in a curl command. Curl is a command line URL calling tool that's built into Linux and Mac OS. If you are using Microsoft Windows, you can still get it. You just got to download it from the curl website. So all I'm doing with my curl command is I'm passing in a couple of headers. One is my authorization. I went ahead of time and I got myself a bearer token that's going to allow me to authorize against my instance. And then secondly, I have to make sure that I set my content type header to application/JSON. Third, I'm calling this URL right here, googleapis.com, whack SQL, whack v1 beta 3, then projects, my project name, and instances. And as you can probably guess, when I call this, it's the same as calling the command line, the gcloud SDK command line, to list my instances. When I hit enter, I get that nice verbose list of all my Cloud SQL instances here, spit back in JSON form from that URL. So the advantage here is not only is it programmatic, like the command line interface can be, but I don't need to have the command line tools installed on my desktop in order to use this. All I need to do is call the command to get a bearer token, so I have authorization, and then I can run this command. Now the two really important pieces of information here were A, this bearer token that I used in order to authorize myself. I had to call previous to this an authorization request and get my OAuth bearer token so that I could put it into this curl statement. The other really important part here is this URL, googleapis.com, whack SQL, whack v1 beta 3. And I got that out of the documentation. This is real important, because obviously you need to know how to list instances, how to create them, etc. Well, go to cloud.google.com, whack SQL, whack docs, whack admin-API, whack index. And what this is going to give you is a nice API index for using any of the different API commands that are in both the RESTful API and the client API. If I expand the reference here, and I just go to instances and list, what I can see is the very first thing it tells me is the HTTP request is that URL that I just used right there, googleapis.com, whack SQL, v1 beta 3, projects, my project ID, and then instances. So all of the various commands are detailed out over here, not just list, but create, delete, export, import, patch, like we used a moment ago. You can do any of these things through the RESTful API, or you can do them through the client API. Let me show you how that works right now. I've got up on screen here a simple little Python application that's going to authenticate to my project and then log in and download a list of instances like we just saw with the curl command. And in order to do that, I need a couple of Google libraries that I downloaded and installed here, the API client library and the OAuth 2 client library. And then what I do is I set up this get authenticated service function. I actually stole this function straight from the Google documentation. You are welcome to steal it word for word as well. All it does is it takes a scope that I wish to gain access to, and then it tries some existing credentials, and if those credentials are invalid, it runs the OAuth 2 flow, and then builds the service, in this case SQL admin v1 beta 3. Now with that service that it's built, it stores that back here in this service function. I simply call things like service.instances.list project sunlit pipe. So now I've got a cool library function that I can call inside of my Python code. And if I run this command here, let's go python lib.py, it's going to do the same thing as that curl. It's just going to pump out this JSON list of all of the instances inside of my project, which is pretty great. I can see up here it authenticated, it constructed the service, and then it built this list. Now obviously there's quite a lot of details to go over for how this works, but specifically I just want to point out the instances.list command that we called and where you can get more information about those commands. Come over here to your web browser again, online documentation, in this case cloud.google.com, whack SQL, whack docs, whack client-libraries. This is going to show you a link to documentation and samples for the client libraries for any of the programming languages that they're available for, .NET, Java, OC, PHP, and what we were just looking at, Python. If you click documentation, you're taken right to a great documentation page where I can look up instances. There's the list command, and I get all the information about instances.list, including what arguments I can pass into it and what results I'm going to get out of it. Of course, if you want to find out what else is in that library, just back right up and check out whatever other functions you want to see. And that concludes this demonstration nugget on Cloud SQL Instances Advanced. We took a look at how you can maintain and update the previously set configurations for your SQL instances, both through the web UI as well as through the command line interface using the patch command. Then we took a brief look at how you can use the two different APIs, the RESTful API and the Client Library API, in order to also manipulate and work with your instances. I hope this has been informative for you. I'd like to thank you for viewing.